Well, welcome everyone. Obviously over the last 24 hours we've continued across our state to experience incredibly difficult conditions from the Queensland border to right down to the Victorian border here in our state. I want to begin by acknowledging that we've had two additional people in Wentworthville, in a mother and her son die in these horrific flood events in Wentworthville. That obviously brings the number of people who've died during this disaster to 7. Our thoughts and prayers and hearts go out to their friends and their family and loved ones at this difficult time. Can I note that in terms of evacuation orders across our state, there are now 20 evacuation orders in place, 59 evacuation orders in place affecting 40,000 people. In relation to evacuation warnings, we have 15 evacuation warnings in place affecting 20,000 people. We also note that there is a pending evacuation order coming for many people as a result of the Manly Dam beginning to spill that will affect 800 homes and 2,000 people. So as we've been saying during this period of time, and we'll continue to repeat that message, if there is an evacuation warning in place, please get ready to leave. If there is an evacuation order in place, please evacuate. Please follow the instructions of our state emergency services. They are there to keep you and your families safe at this difficult time. And as we move through the week, we will continue to see instances of flash flooding. We note in the Hawkesbury region as well, and Commissioner York will provide further information. We are seeing in various areas, particularly at Windsor, North Richmond and Sackville, we are seeing similar flooding to what we saw last year. But please continue to follow those instructions by the SES, and that will ensure that you keep your family and friends safe. If you are unsure, please contact the SES on 132 500. Now, as you'd be aware, I have spent the last few days inspecting many areas of the Northern Rivers and the northeast coast of our state and seeing firsthand the devastation that has occurred in many of those communities. As I've said, we'll be doing everything we can from a state government level to get every one of those communities back on their feet as quickly as possible. And in doing that, today we were making an appointment of Deputy Commissioner Mal Lanyon, who will take on the position of Northern New South Wales Recovery Coordinator. I've known Mal obviously for many years. He has served as Deputy Commissioner of the New South Wales Police Force for 3 years under former Commissioner Mick Fuller and now Commissioner Karen Webb. From my experience in the roles that he has played in the New South Wales Police Force, that he is the best person suited for this role, working very closely with the Head of Resilience New South Wales, Shane Fitzsimmons. This will be a role that coordinates a strong regional response, given the substantial task ahead of us as a state in getting all those communities back on their feet as quickly as possible. The state of play on the situation in the Northern Rivers. We currently have around 600 ADF personnel on the ground. We expect that to be close to 1,300 by the end of the day. There are 385 members of the ADF personnel who have been deployed in the Lismore and Ballina and surrounding areas, about around 100 ADF personnel in the Coracai region and the surrounding areas, as well as 100 in Evans Head and surrounds. So we also, in addition to that, have around 1,300 state emergency service personnel and volunteers on the ground, as well as thousands of others, as we ensure that we get this cleanup in the Northern Rivers occurring as quickly as possible. We currently have 20 evacuation centres in operation across the state and 4 recovery centres in the Northern in the Northern Rivers. Those centres are areas where both the New South Wales Government Support Services as well as with the ADF are in one place to provide assistance to those people in those communities who need them. They are currently located in Mullumbimby and Wollumbar, Lismore and Kyogle, and tomorrow we will be announcing an additional recovery. We'll be opening, an additional recovery centre in Casino. We also have embedded in those centres Service New South Wales presence as well, but in addition to that, we will have 2 additional Service New South Wales mobile services going up to provide extra assistance to those communities. They'll be located in Lismore and Wollumbar. The Crisis Cabinet met in addition this morning. There are key areas, obviously, that are of significant focus for the government at this time. The number one issue is obviously with the cleanup, which, from what I've seen, certainly on the ground in the Northern Rivers, that cleanup operation is well underway and will pick up substantially as we move through this period. It's at one certain location, which the Commissioner will speak to, where we are having a truck every minute come through with debris for disposal. And in addition to that, just yesterday there was 4,000 tonnes of debris in those areas that have been collected. But it is a substantial task at hand. Public Works Advisory, obviously working in conjunction now with the ADF on the ground, will ensure, and we are completely committed for that clean-up to occur as quickly as possible. In addition to that, housing remains a major task. It is going to be a substantial operation for the New South Wales government. We currently have 887 people in temporary accommodation. There are many people over the course of this period of time that obviously will need to be provided with urgent and temporary housing. We are working through that. We will have something to say very shortly to provide confidence. So for those people who have lost their home or will temporarily need to be relocated, we are working through those issues, and that will be a sustained focus. We don't want anybody in any area right across our state, but particularly today I want to say to the people of the Northern Rivers, we will work side by side with you as we move through this difficult time. We are completely focused on the cleanup, on housing and providing financial support for those people who need it. This will be a long road ahead, a very long road ahead, but I know, based on the spirits that I've seen on the ground of the great people of the Northern Rivers, that we will get through this together. And whilst the task at hand may seem for many to be overwhelming, I know that we will get through it, because not just the support that all levels of government will provide, from a federal government level to a state government and local government level, ultimately what we've seen over the course of the week is the courage, the determination, the great values of our people. Not just mates helping out mates, but volunteers helping out volunteers and strangers helping out strangers. People not looking out for themselves, but looking out for others. That is the spirit, and those are the values that make our state and our nation great. And I know that for many, whilst, as I said, that task seems overwhelming, what is more overwhelming is the spirit in every single person on the Northern Rivers that I've seen over the course of this week. The Deputy Premier and myself will be returning there today, and we will stand side by side to ensure that every community doesn't just get back on its feet, but ultimately as well comes back stronger than before. We've done it in the past, and we'll do it again. And I want to thank everybody, all our volunteers, our members of the SES, the members of the RFS, and right across the board, who have sacrificed so much, who have worked so hard. The stories of courage and bravery will never be lost. I want to thank them for the work they have done, for the work that they'll continue to do, and once again, thank everybody across the state for the sacrifices they have made. As I said, that spirit remains incredibly strong. And I'll just finish with saying, please continue, wherever you are across our great state, to follow the instructions of the SES. They're not there for the sake of it. They're there to keep your family and your friends safe. I'll now pass to the Deputy Premier. Following the Deputy Premier, we will hear from the Bureau with Dean Narramore, who will provide us an update in terms of what we can expect over the course of the week. Commissioner York will then provide an update from the State Emergency Services as Commissioner. Shane Fitzsimmons will then speak in relation to the recovery work that is underway and the coordination of that recovery work across the state from Resilience New South Wales. And then I will have Deputy Commissioner Mal Lanyon speak as the new Northern New South Wales Recovery Coordinator. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Premier. And look, firstly, I just want to begin by saying thank you to all of our police and emergency services that are continually working around the clock to keep our communities safe across this state. They are still responding to calls at all hours of the night and into the day. I also note that with all this heavy rainfall that we've seen, it is still raining across many parts of the state right now. This has impacted on roads, it is seeing the ground saturated, and if any little bit of rainfall lands in some of these areas, it's not going to take long before we see those rivers once again full and we see flash flooding in a number of areas. We are seeing already there are landslips occurring across the state. We ask people to continue to do the right thing, to ensure that they stay out of floodwaters, to ensure that they keep themselves safe. The Premier and I have been in the northern rivers of the state. We've seen the devastation that has occurred within that area. We know that this is a huge task, but we've also said that the New South Wales Government will be putting in the resources and the support that is needed to help those communities to get back on their feet. I note that the ADF are actually providing support up to 1,300 by the end of today. That ADF support is critical in those communities. It is providing support in ensuring that we're getting food to people in those areas, providing support in the cleanup. And over the coming days, we want to see more support, more ADF, more sets of hands on the ground supporting these communities that need it right now. We also have recovery centres that have been established. There are 5 recovery centres that will be open by tomorrow. Now these are so important because when you've lost everything in a flood, you don't have any documents, you don't have any idea where to go. But these recovery centres will allow you to be able to go into these places, talk to someone face to face, and you'll be able to get the advice about how to get some accommodation, how to get a roof over your head, how do you actually get your licence, how do you actually start to identify who you are again, what financial support is there. There are going to be numerous agencies inside these recovery centres. They will be a one-stop shop, and they are going to be continually rolled out over the coming days and the coming weeks to ensure that these communities have got all the support that they need right there on the ground. Let's not forget, our agricultural sector in this area has also been impacted. You know, for a lot of our farmers, they've lost their homes, but they've also lost their livestock. So we're actually seeing fodder drops happening right now. Fodder drops onto farms where there is livestock stranded, where we can't get in at the moment, where those farmers can't get in and feed them. We've got collection centres that have been established, and already we've seen over 1 million kilograms of fodder that is being collected in that area. These efforts are seeing all agencies working together to ensure that we get that support on the ground as quickly as possible. When you have a look at the cleanup, yesterday we saw something like over 500 trucks that actually were part of the cleanup. As we see more roads opening up, we're going to see more trucks being able to move in and out of those communities to ensure that the cleanup process happens as quickly as possible. Again, I reiterate to those communities, you know, we will continue to come back, we will continue to support you, and we want to make sure that you come back bigger and stronger as a community. We've seen that in the community spirit that has been displayed, but it's the New South Wales Government, with our support, that we will make sure that every step of the way has been considered and no rock will be left unturned to ensure that you are given the support required.
Thank you, Premier and Deputy Premier. And as you've heard already, it has been a devastating week or 10 days across New South Wales. From anywhere from the Queensland border all the way down to the Victorian border has either experienced minor, moderate or major flooding. As we speak right now, rain is continuing across large parts of the metropolitan area, into the Hunter and southwards into the Illawarra. Now, since 9 o'clock this morning, we've seen 50 to 100 millimetres in the northern suburbs of Sydney, and that is now pushing up towards the central coast. We've seen some flash flooding in that part of the world, and that's likely to move further north in the coming days. And we do have warnings there for intense rainfall that is unfortunately likely to lead to life-threatening and dangerous flash flooding. Now, I'll start with some of the major flood warnings. Further north on the Macleay River, we did have a major flood warning for the Kempsey area. Thankfully, it looks like it'll peak at around moderate flood levels around the Kempsey area, so that's good news for residents and communities on the Macleay River as it moves downstream. Moving into the Hunter, we have major flooding on the Wollumbai Brook River at Beluga, I should say, and then that's going to move towards the Singleton area with major flooding as we move into Wednesday, with minor flooding possible in the Maitland area. Now, of most concern is the Hawkesbury Nepean catchment. Both the Hawkesbury and the Nepean River are in major flooding as we speak right now, with many locations experiencing levels equal to or greater than what we saw in March of 2021. So we're talking places like North Richmond, Wiseman, Ferry are experiencing major flooding similar to levels last year. In the Upper Nepean, we're also seeing flood levels similar to March last year at Menangle. We're expecting major flooding to impact the Windsor area, higher than last week and equal to or similar to what we saw in March 2021. And with all the ongoing rainfall through large parts of the catchment, we can continue to see these rivers increase as we move into tonight and in tomorrow. Penrith at this stage is expecting moderate flood warning, but of course highly dependent on how much further rainfall falls in the next 6 to 12 hours through the Hawkesbury Nepean catchment, and that then will flow into our major rivers. So for residents and communities on and near the Hawkesbury Nepean catchment, please stay up to date with the latest forecasts and warnings and listen to all advice from emergency services as this dangerous and rapidly evolving flood situation continues to impact our highly populated regions of the Central Coast, Sydney Metropolitan and down into the Illawarra. Now, speaking of the Illawarra, we also have some moderate flooding on the Shellhaven River and also around the St George's Basin, where we could see major flooding tonight and into early morning tomorrow, again depending on how much rain we experience down there. And further south around the south coast, thankfully not looking like a major rainfall or flood event down there, but we still are experiencing minor to moderate flooding. And as I mentioned, we've got minor to moderate flooding from the Queensland border all the way down to the Victorian border. A particular concern tonight is the Hawkesbury and Nepean rivers, with additional rainfall leading to widespread major flooding at or greater than what we saw in March 2021. Rain is continuing through much of the metropolitan area, as I mentioned, with 50 to 100 millimetres already occurring. But there is some good news. The low pressure system is moving off the mid-north coast as we speak right now, and it'll continue to track towards the east-southeast tonight and tomorrow. So it'll continue the rain on the Central Coast, Illawarra and Sydney area tonight, then ease as we get into early hours of tomorrow morning, and then finally drag all the rainfall off our east coast as we get into tomorrow afternoon, with just a few showers remaining. The other concern though is as we move into tonight, winds are rapidly increasing along parts of the Illawarra and Sydney metropolitan area. The Sydney airport is gusting to 60 kilometres an hour, Watamolla is gusting up to 80 kilometres an hour. And we expect those winds to increase and strengthen further tonight as the low rapidly deepens offshore. Now, this is obviously not great news. On top of the flooding and the rainfall that we're occurring, these kind of wind speeds gusting up to 90 kilometres an hour are likely to bring down trees and power lines. So driving conditions are already dangerous and hazardous through the Hunter, Metropolitan and Illawarra areas. Now, combined with the wind tonight, it means dangerous and hazardous driving conditions. So please, if you do have to travel, think about that, because it's dangerous conditions on the road. These winds are likely to bring down trees and power lines, particularly that soils are already saturated. So it doesn't take winds up to 90 kilometres an hour, only 50 or 60 kilometre-hour winds are able to bring down trees. And finally, we also have damaging and hazardous surf associated with this deepening low. So we have a damaging and hazardous surf warning extend from Newcastle all the way down to Bega, and that includes everywhere in between. We're likely to see this hazardous and damaging surf to lead to coastal erosion, particularly for our south-facing beaches as this low winds up tonight and into tomorrow. And other good news is finally on Thursday, this low will have moved all the weather away and much of New South Wales will start to see sunshine apart from just a few coastal showers and a possible storm in northeastern New South Wales. But even though the sun does come out, we're likely to see many of these rivers continue to experience major flooding, and for some, the flood peak won't occur until Wednesday or Thursday. So even though the rain has stopped, the flood threat has not. So please stay up to date with the latest forecasts and warnings via the website, Bureau's website, app and social media. And as always, listen to all advice from emergency services. And now I'll hand you over to the Commissioner for more information on the great work they are doing.
Thanks, Premier. Thank you. So as you've heard, the risk has not passed in many communities across New South Wales. The SES and our partner agencies are operational from the Queensland border to the Victoria border. Further in the northern rivers, where they're helping clean up, coordinating the clean up and working with our other agencies to ensure that our communities can get back to normal as quickly as possible. We have put additional resources in throughout the whole state. So we're not only supported by our partner emergency agencies and police, but also the ADF, and we've brought in additional resources from Western Australia, South Australia, ACT, Tasmania and Victoria to assist us. We've heard the weather forecast for some of the areas, and last night we saw the severe thunderstorms that passed through the mid-north coast, the metropolitan area, Illawarra and south coast. They came through in the middle of the night and we issued 12 evacuation orders for those areas around mainly the metropolitan area and Illawarra for people to evacuate from their homes. Today we are issuing shortly another evacuation order for the area around the Manly Dam. So I ask those residents to be aware of where you are, and when we put the order out, please follow our instructions and leave your premises and evacuate. It does affect about 800 homes and 2,000 residents. The dam is currently spilling, but I am informed by the engineers that the dam itself is safe, but the water will continue to come over, and as these thunderstorms pass through, it may in fact increase. Sadly, we have had the news of the two deceased persons today, bringing the total of deceased through this event to 7. So I remind people about the need to follow our orders, to listen out for your risk, and to make sure that you don't put yourself or your family at risk, and that by following what we say, our orders, that you don't put my emergency service volunteers and other partner agencies' lives at risk also. So today we're still, as I say, suffering these severe thunderstorms with the rain moving through the metropolitan area and the Illawarra and south coast. There is a warning out for travelling on the roads about the metropolitan area, and the chance of extreme flooding, flash flooding across those areas is high. My message to our community is listen to these orders, listen to the warnings, know your risk, and don't assume because you haven't been affected before, you won't be affected through these thunderstorms. It is good news that it will finish or ease off by Thursday, but we still have a way to go with these thunderstorms. I want to thank particularly the volunteers who have given up their time, often who are self-employed, that have come out and helped the community. But also I want to send the message to those employers who have our volunteers. Thank you for allowing them to come out and help the community in a time of need. And hopefully you can continue to support them by allowing them the time to come out and work in the response to any request for assistance that the community may need. I can say over the last 24 hours, we had over 2,500 requests for assistance and over 100 flood-related rescues, particularly in the metropolitan area. So again, the risk is real. If you leave your homes and go out onto the roads, we want to make sure you're safe, so know your risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. As indicated, we are getting really close to the transition to recovery, particularly in northern New South Wales, but naturally our focus remains with the ongoing response effort. Significant amount of work continues with the preparatory work for the full scale of recovery, which will be many months and many years. We've already got 4 recovery centres established up north, and a 5th one will come online tomorrow, working with local councils, local government. There will be a number of others that will continue to be established and identified across North East New South Wales over the coming weeks, based on where best to service and support impacted and displaced communities throughout that region. Local committees, led through local councils. Some have already started meeting, given the circumstances they find themselves in. And right at the outset, we initially appointed a regional recovery coordinator up there to start putting the systems and arrangements in place in anticipation of what will be, as was the unparalleled disaster flood event, there will also be an unparalleled recovery event that will be required in North East New South Wales. To that end, after speaking with Mal Lanyon last night, Deputy Commissioner Lanyon, he's accepted the appointment to the position of the North East New South Wales Recovery Coordinator. Mal will be joined with our Director from Resilience New South Wales as a Deputy, who's been on the ground for the last week, forming up the networks and the relationships. Mal will be the principal conduit to understand and connect with the needs and the priorities of local councils, of local communities, of those local committees, and be able to channel those back through to me as the State Emergency Recovery Controller, and our work here at the State Recovery Committee, and our report through to the Minister and the Cabinet Policy Committee, the Crisis Policy Committee of Cabinet, chaired by the Premier. Already, as indicated, there's a lot of work underway with the clean-up and the washout, as indicated by the Premier and the Deputy earlier. Significant movements are occurring and getting reports back from the Public Works and Environmental Services based on the initiative that was first deployed only 12 months ago in the Hawkesbury, Nepean and the Mid-North Coast areas. They're already a week ahead of where they were during the floods of last year, with the logistics and the movement and the engagement of contractors and the extraordinary amount of logistics, the bins and the transfer stations that are underway. The primary regional transfer station today, the reports back are they're seeing through a dump truck every minute in terms of the volume that's being removed from different communities across North East New South Wales. That will continue and will continue for some time. Big focus through the State Recovery Committee, again meeting last night, I think for our third or fourth meeting this week, picking up focus areas around agriculture, around housing, around well-being and mental health, around infrastructure, government infrastructure, significant toll in things like police stations, schools, customer service centres, all manner of significant infrastructure elements there. Our roads and transport networks, the connection between our roads division and our councils, a significant disruption to roads is already coming together in terms of the analysis. Given the extraordinary scale that we already know, but is being built more in detail with the data and the available insights coming from the field and coming from our key areas of disaster management, the key appointment of Mal will ensure we retain a focus over the coming months, not only in terms of Mal's experience, and I've had the pleasure of working with Mal for many years, but importantly, as we transition out of response and lead into recovery, we will still need to maintain for some time significant resupply and support to communities that will be isolated because of significant road degradation, utilising and maintaining the underpinning emergency management arrangements that are led and coordinated at that local level through police superintendents and local area commands. It's a natural and necessary transition that will see an optimised, focused and support being managed and coordinated to the people of North East New South Wales. As we did up there, we've already appointed earlier this week, a recovery coordinator for the Hawkesbury Nepean region in anticipation of what is unfolding and is likely to unfold over the next 24 hours or so. They've already been connecting with local councils and local communities in understanding and anticipating what's going to be needed as we start seeing the waters reside there as well. So a very long, difficult and challenging process ahead, but with the appointment of Mal and the very well practiced but enhanced state arrangements around coordination and understanding priorities and needs, as the Premier and the Deputy have said, we will absolutely be with the people of New South Wales and in particular North East New South Wales that are centering up for the focus on recovery at this stage.
Thank you, Commissioner and Premier. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute honour to be appointed as the Regional Recovery Coordinator. I look very much forward to working with Commissioner Fitzsimmons to ensure that we help the people of the Northern Rivers recover from what has been significant and unprecedented flood events. There is much work to be done, and I'm under no illusion of how large the job will be. It will be about working with local communities to ensure that the solutions that we seem to put in place are what the community want. Police officers join the New South Wales Police Force to serve the community. The appointment to this role allows me to add greater impetus to ensure that the people of northern New South Wales can recover quickly. I look forward to working with the local communities to ensure that their needs are dealt with efficiently and quickly. It's important that we provide quick responses, certainly in the first instance, to ensure that people can restore a semblance of life that they deserve. It is challenging up there. We understand that this will be a long process, but I'm committed to working closely with the community to ensure that that occurs. My appointment is absolutely consistent with my current role, which has been about coordinating the resources to support the SES as the combat agency during the response phase to these floods. My new role will be about coordinating resources to support the local communities, and I look forward to that. Thank you.
Deputy Commissioner, while you're just there, can I ask, just logistically, are you going to be based here or there, or how's that? When are you heading to the region? How's this going to work?
I'll certainly head towards the regions in the next couple of days, and I'll work back and forwards between the region and Sydney, depending on where the needs are. Again, it's about being very close to the community and responding to the community, so as much as I'm needed, I'll be up there.
And so, I mean, when does the role start now? And I guess what's your first thing you're going to do?
Yeah, recovery is already commencing, obviously. One of the things that's important is that we continue to try to get people back into their normal lives as quickly as possible. So as the SES release certain areas back and recovery commence in full swing, then that role really does ramp up. But as far as I'm concerned, my role starts now, and it's about starting to work with the communities. The Commissioner already outlined that a number of things have already been done, and things are already in place to make sure that recovery is underway. I certainly know that local recovery committees are starting to talk to work out what's important for them. So I'll fit very well within that structure, pick that up, but then work more with the local communities to understand their needs.
So is your job to request more ADF support, and would you be doing that?
My job is very much to ensure that the local communities have all the resources they require to recover. So if there's a need for further resources, and I think at the moment, to be honest, there are a lot of people working wholeheartedly right across a range of agencies and the ADF to provide that support.
What have you made of the response so far? I mean, there were meant to be 900 ADF personnel there on Sunday. Do you think the ADF response at this stage is up to scratch?
We're working very closely with the ADF, and to be honest, they have done an outstanding job in support. I think you've seen the air rescues that they did very early in the piece in response, and now they are very heavily committed to the ground to make sure that they're getting out into the communities and making sure the communities feel supported.
So do you agree with the Deputy Premier who just said we want to see more support, more ADF, more sets of hands?
I agree that I'll be committed to putting as many resources into the field to support the community as it possibly needs.
Where do those resources come from?
Well, I think you've already seen that we're very well resourced in terms of the agencies that have provided support so far to the communities. The ADF have committed significant personnel, and we'll actually make sure that we coordinate those resources. What's important, it's not simply about numbers, it's ensuring that we have the right resources and the right capability in the right places. So that's what I'll be working closely with communities and certainly with Commissioner Fitzsimmons to ensure.
Premier, on the ADF response.
You've appointed Deputy Commissioner Maloney into this new role, but wasn't that something that Resilience New South Wales should have been doing? It just seems like another layer of bureaucracy that has been added. In the press release it said they'll be coordinating communication with different agencies, councils and things like that. Is that not something that should have been happening through Resilience New South Wales?
No, I mean, there's no duplication here at all. This is enhancing the response with someone of the calibre of the Deputy Commissioner in Mal Lanyon. And we had, as the Commissioner Fitzsimmons has said, we've had somebody in that role, but given the scale of the task that is ahead of us, I think it's incredibly important that we have somebody with the logistical skill set as the Deputy Commissioner has, the work that he has spoken to, but also that he's overseen throughout the pandemic and many crises in the past, given the scale of the task that is ahead of us in the Northern Rivers, whether that's, and he spoke to this, but whether that's in housing, whether that's in the cleanup, whether that's in the infrastructure side of things, but ultimately as well, which I think is incredibly important, it's certainly impressed on me, during my time up in the Northern Rivers has been the collaboration with the local community. This is a partnership, and there needs to be buy-in from the local community through those committees into the state government support services. And doing that in conjunction needs somebody who's worked in the past who can collaborate very well with all the various issues, and there are many. And as already been said today, this recovery will not take days or weeks, it will take months and years ahead. And we need to make sure that we are with that community every step of the way. And my message today is we have your back. It's been a very difficult time. The task ahead is tough, but I have no doubt that somebody with the Deputy Commissioner's experience, professionalism and skill set will serve the people of the Northern Rivers very well as we move through this period of time.
Premier, on the ADF response, you said they were meant to be 900 arriving Sunday, but it's still at 600. Why is it taking so long to get ADF personnel to the Northern Rivers?
Well, what's pleasing to see is they're arriving from my perspective.
But you said there'd be 900 on Sunday.
Yeah, and so what we're seeing by the end of the day is we'll have 1,300. That's the advice I've received. I think it's been said, we also understand it's not, I don't know if it was Mal or it was Commissioner Fitzsimmons spoke about this, was that it's not about the numbers, it's about having people to do the jobs and making sure they're deployed in the way that's going to make that's going to have the biggest impact to get our communities back on their feet as quickly as possible. So obviously there is direction given through the State Emergency Operations Centre in relation to the deployment of those troops, and I'm very pleased to have them. As I said, this is a joint effort from all levels of government. We need to continue to work together. It's great to see them coming through. There was no doubt yesterday I saw a strong presence on the ground. We still have many communities in the Northern Rivers that only for the first time now have been able to be accessed, and it's great and pleasing to see the ADF going in, not just to do the work, but importantly to provide assurance to those local communities that we are there with them through this difficult time. And we want to make sure, as we have said very clearly, the ADF is there to help with the cleanup, to help with a whole range of areas up there. But as I said, the key priorities for this government are working with local communities through Resilience New South Wales is to ensure that we get people back on their feet as quickly as possible, to get people into housing. As I said, 900 people in temporary accommodation as we speak. And there's going to be a much greater demand. This is going to be a really challenging task, but based on the discussion and the advice we received this morning and the work that has been conducted in relation to housing, I'm very confident about where we sit now. But that does not mean that there's not going to be issues as we move forward, but housing, clean up, getting that financial support, plus the infrastructure, getting roads and bridges rebuilt. There's a substantial task ahead of us, but I believe the structures that we have in place will ensure that we work very closely with the communities to get them back on their feet and come back stronger.
Not taking away from what's happened in the north, are we going to have enough resources for the recovery in Sydney? Because we're now talking about floods that are worse than last year.
Yeah. So, for example, in relation to, and I might pass the Commissioner to speak to that, but in relation to the ADF deployment, we've held some of those members back, some of that personnel back to here in Sydney and in other areas of New South Wales, because we understand that as we're focusing on the recovery up north, this is as I said, this is a dual crisis. You're dealing with the recovery and you're dealing with a response, immediate response, as floodwaters continue to occur right across our state. The Hawkesbury opinion is, as has been said by everyone today, remains a substantial concern for us. And let's not forget, these are still major flooding events. If Hawkesbury flooding in many parts, worse than it was last year, was deemed to be a crisis. Let's not forget that whilst we've had a substantial catastrophe in the Northern Rivers, we have a crisis here in other parts of the state. So it's all hands on deck, all areas of government working together, and the best thing you can do right across our state is follow those instructions. I think it was remiss not to say earlier, please don't drive through floodwaters. Please don't drive through floodwaters. We cannot say that more than enough. So follow the instructions, evacuation orders in place, please leave. As the Commissioner has said, that evacuation order in that Manly region will be coming on very shortly. Please get ready to leave now. And if there's an evacuation warning in place, please get ready.
For a state of emergency being declared?
Well, the advice we've received that that's not necessary at this stage. It's something that we discuss on a daily basis. Ultimately, where we sit today, I might ask the Commissioner to make some further comments in relation to this, but we believe that the coordination that we have in place between the Commonwealth and the state and all of our agencies has the capacity to deal with the situation in front of us. That issue would only be relevant in circumstances where we would need to be directing agencies to not take on certain tasks in these circumstances to keep people safe. That is not the case at the moment. We have strong coordination through the State Emergency Operations Centre to deal with the issues that we have in front of us. If that situation changes, then of course we would immediately make that declaration. We are not in that position now, but I might pass to the Commissioner to make some further comments.
Thank you, Premier. So declaring a state of emergency means that I can have some additional powers in relation to the resources, but I can say the partnership and the assistance from all the agencies, the ADF, the other states, I have not once been knocked back on any request that I required for resources. We have put as many resources we can dealing with both that response as well as rescues, life-saving rescues, as well as the clean-up and moving into recovery. All government agencies, all volunteer services, and as I say, Commonwealth and other state jurisdictions have given the SES everything that I have asked of them in relation to this response. So at this stage, but I'm constantly reviewing, but at this stage I don't find it necessary to declare a state of emergency.
The situation in Manly, there's images on social media of roads looking like rivers, the M5 flooded, people can't actually leave Manly to get to Sydney. How critical is the situation there? Can you give us some more details, because Manly hasn't been affected so far?
So what we have been told is it's gone into red alert, which means there is a chance of spilling at that Manly Dam. There are houses downstream from that dam, and it has started to fill and go through the streets. So there's an emergency order being prepared to go out, so it's clear what streets and homes are affected, so that the public know who has to evacuate from that area. There will be an emergency alert going out by text to let people know of their risk. I am informed by the engineer that there isn't a risk of the dam wall breaking. It is more the overflow from the top of the dam. So we want to make sure that community is safe. And as you say, many roads in Sydney, as this storm passes through today and into the night, of flooding, some down to about 10 kilometres an hour. So again, don't drive through the floodwaters. That flash flooding takes a lot of drivers by surprise, and it can be very dangerous. And if you don't have to travel on the roads while this storm is passing through, please don't. If you see floodwaters, please find another route if you have to.
Just in terms of not having to drive on the roads, 3 o'clock at school pickup, there'll be students trying to get home on the public transport network, and there's been warnings that that's going to be problematic for days. Should a decision have been made to shut schools in Sydney today, given the forecast of what was coming?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we'll take the advice from the Department of Education and from our State and Emergency Service personnel and the Commissioner in relation to that. If it got to a point where we didn't believe it was safe, then we would make that request. Just on schools, though, I'll make this point as well. Some of the challenges we're facing up north as well, we have many schools that are closed. I want to thank the Department of Education and the Education Minister for the continued work that they do. I've seen that firsthand during the pandemic. Getting kids back in the classroom is going to be a substantial task up north as well. We're doing everything we can to either get those schools as a priority fix, to get teachers into homes, and to get parents to have for parents to be able to get their children back into class as quickly as possible.
Premier, just back to Lanyon for a minute. Will you confirm that he won't have that bureaucratic red tape to do what he needs to do for this recovery? I mean, Andrew Johnson called for somebody outside the government to be leading this recovery. Why didn't you go with that approach?
I went with the best person for the job, and Deputy Commissioner Mal Lanyon is that person. He is somebody who cuts through. He's somebody who doesn't let bureaucracy and red tape get in the way, and that's exactly what we need in these circumstances. We also need somebody that can work very closely with the local communities. Ultimately, this role is all about people and getting our people, back on their feet as quickly as possible, and having the support that they need to get into homes, to get the financial assistance, to provide for a clean-up that ensures that homes are cleared, and cleaned as quickly as possible. You know, I accept what you know, Andrew has, and you know, I very much respect Andrew's opinion. I work very closely as well alongside Andrew and the Commissioner in relation to the bushfires as in my former role. But ultimately, it's doesn't matter. Yeah, that you can get good people outside, you can get good people inside. My view is to appoint the person who I believe is best placed to get the Northern Rivers back on their feet, and that's Mal Lanyon.
I mean, how have the state's emergency management response systems not improved more since the fires? We've had a Royal Commission, we've had inquiries. Why not? Why isn't it better?
Well, a couple of things. There's no doubt what we've seen in the northern rivers was a catastrophic event. It was unprecedented. It was unpredicted, and it occurred incredibly quickly. And the SES have done an amazing job working tirelessly to help get people through. I also make this point. I think it's lost on many people that when it comes to natural disasters in our state and in our country, we rely on volunteers. That's the system we have in place. And it's a wonderful system because it's based on that great spirit of service and volunteerism. And through the SES and the RFS and many of our other volunteer organisations, they work tirelessly and put their lives on the line to keep people safe. I met so many people up in the Northern Rivers, SES volunteers who did not, went to work whilst their own homes were flooding. They put their own lives at risk to help strangers and neighbours to get through without any care or consideration for their own position, for their own home. And that is something that I think is uniquely Australian and something that we should all be incredibly proud of. What we also saw in the Northern Rivers was other volunteers who were not registered to the SES, through the RFS, who also put their life on the line. And they had to, because of the circumstances that we found ourselves in up in the north. And I want to commend them, the acts of bravery and courage that I have spoken to people about over this period of time. It makes me immensely proud to be Premier of the state, immensely proud to be the leader of so many great people who have made so many sacrifices looking out for others. So whether it's volunteers who are registered in our organisations, whether it's volunteers who have just said, I'm here to help and I'm going to do whatever I can to get people through, I think is something that is truly special. In addition to that, if you look at where we sit on the recovery, there's significant inroads have been made. So, for example, the disaster declaration has been made 4 days quicker than last year. The funding package announced was made 9 days quicker than the event last year. The clean-up task force that was mobilised has occurred, as Commissioner Fitzsimmons has said, a week earlier than last year, and the first recovery centre has opened 10 days quicker than last year. So we talk to progress. It's very clear to me that progress has been made, particularly at a time when we've had one of the most catastrophic events. I mean, that progress, in terms of the improvement from what we saw last year, has occurred at a time where we've had a more challenging environment in front of us. So I believe things have got better. There's always things that governments can do better, absolutely. And once we're through this, we'll obviously do the reviews and have an honest assessment. That's what good governments do. But given the catastrophic event we've seen, our job right now is to ensure we have a strong recovery. That's what I'm focused on. It's getting on with the job, getting the cleanup conducted as quickly as possible, getting people back on their feet, getting people into homes, and getting money and financial support for people who need it. That's where the focus is.
Could we have fixed things like telecommunications in areas like Lismore, where we know that sort of floods are prone? Like, it's an unprecedented event, but we knew that area is prone to floods. So things like that, could they not have been done sooner to prepare the area?
Well, we'll look at that. But I mean, we've still got significant areas of the state up there that still have telecommunication services down, that still have power. Electricity is still down in many areas, including Lismore. I know Essential Energy, and I want to call Essential Energy out, actually, because they have done a very good job over this period of time, and are working through the night to, where it is safe, reconnect those areas. Now, Lismore has its challenges right now for safety reasons, and obviously in certain towns like Coracay, Woodburn, for example, there are still where the floodwaters are at, it is still not safe for reconnection, but they are doing everything they can around the clock to do it. And to John Cleland and the team, I want to thank you very much for the work that you have done. But look, when it comes to telecommunications, when it comes to those other areas, we will look back and review it. It's very loud and clear in Ballina. It's very hard to coordinate when you don't have telecommunications. That was a substantial challenge that faced the people of Ballina during that period of time. Thanks very much.
Commissioner,
Last question.
Just one bit of breaking news in regards to Manly. That warning has been downgraded for the dam. You probably don't have information about that yet, but if it's been downgraded to a warning, what does that actually mean for the people who live in those 800 homes?
All right, so that means they need to get ready and listen to our warnings. Make sure that they have all their essential items such as medications, documentation, look after their household pets, ensure that they are ready to evacuate if we lift from a warning to an evacuation order. The rain and thunderstorms has not finished yet today. There is a chance that it may go over that area and we may go back up into that evacuation order. So I ask the community, please be ready, be aware of the risk and listen to the warnings that the SES put out.
Thanks, everyone.